Humans love stories. From the moment we learned to communicate artistically, we just couldn't get enough of them. And as the arts have advanced and we've unlocked more and more ways to weave tales, it's become entirely possible to never have to experience the same story twice. Of course, no one does that because it's too comforting of a feeling to take in a piece of media that resonates with you and makes you go,
"Why, it tastes so good. I think I'd like to try it a second time."
And for most consumers, that means it's time for a rewatch, reread, re-listen, and sometimes even a rewatching of a re-listenable rewatch. But creators, or sometimes just producers, have added options. Want more of a story? Hit it with a sequel, threequel, or whatever the hell is going on with The Land Before Time. You can also do some shifting around to go with the reboot format for a new perspective, and if not that, well, there's the much more direct and fairly controversial remake. But there's still another trickier hit-or-miss method that mostly shows up if someone wants a story to be reborn in a new media format entirely: presenting the adaptation. If you've ever been a diehard fan of a story or franchise, you know that adaptations can create a beautiful warmth in your soul just as easily as they can crush your spirit in ways you've never felt before. Whenever I've had discussions with people about adaptations versus the other methods I listed earlier, it always seems like they have extra emotional baggage to carry. This could be because of the balancing act of being true to your source material, but also being uniquely presented enough to warrant the shift of format. It's like the tenderness of a remake, but with the added expectations of a reboot, and, depending on what it's transferring from, the need for expansion that comes with a sequel all at once. But usually being generally faithful or unfaithful to the original is the most important factor for getting received well or not, which makes sense emotionally speaking. People want to see the version of the story and characters they grew to love within the adaptation, and if they don't, you're cursed to be synonymous with a sweater that says something like, "The book was better," or even worse, having your trailer hounded with comments of how superior the original was. But not every time. Since around the mid-2010s, there's been a game franchise I make sure to revisit every autumn: the Costume Quest games. The first game came out in 2010, a bonus winter-themed DLC released later that year, and a full sequel arrived in 2014. Though the main games are fairly short, each being beatable in under 7 hours, they left a huge impact on me from the first playthrough. A humorous turn-based RPG about saving Halloween was pretty much everything I wanted at the time, and it's only aged better as the years have gone on. You play as one of two siblings, Ren or Reynolds, and use superpowered costumes and the assistance of your friends to fight your way through whatever evil force is trying to ruin your favorite holiday this time. And there's a bunch of fun little side quests to take part in as well, of course. The inviting fall atmosphere always pulls me into a sense of comfort even when insane battles are happening on screen. Every character has so much personality to them, even if they only exist to offer a quick one-liner before heading out, and the comical writing as a whole always brings a smile to my face, no matter how many times I've read the jokes. There's also a sentimental angle to it as well, since me and my best friend Jamal found the games at the same time all those years ago and played them together quite a bit. Every now and then he joins up for the replay, adding to the years of positive memories associated with the franchise. Really, the only downside I felt is the limited content, since it's only 2 short games to play, and as time went on without a third being announced, I came to terms with the fact that it was probably going to stay that way. Until a few years ago when I found out there was apparently an animated series released in 2019. It wasn't a new game, but it was something, and 2 years ago, after I got over that weird thing in my brain that counterproductively stops me from interacting with things I'm excited about, I sat down to start watching, and I was so disappointed. The story was completely different, some of my favorite characters were missing with no explanation, and even the titular costumes were heavily downgraded from the magical, larger-than-life presence they carried in the games. The rules seemed to be rewritten about how everything worked as well, from the costume creations to the monsters being weird skinwalkers instead of poorly disguised buffoons, and a bizarre focus on nougat as the only candy in existence. So I dropped the show after a couple episodes. But a year later, it was on my mind again during my annual replay of the games, and I decided to give it another chance with altered expectations, letting it have room to be its own thing and see if it was potentially good on its own terms. and a few episodes in, I did find myself appreciating it more as a standalone product. The show original characters were really well developed and fit into the universe pretty comfortably. Some of them became new favorites of the franchise that blended into the world pretty well, like the mysterious matriarch Una and the fame-obsessed grubbin Rudy Toots. I found the new lore to be pretty interesting, and in between the uncharacteristically serious arcs, I started seeing a lot more comedic similarities to the tone of the games.
Benji, no! Richard has a family!
Close enough.
Aren't you supposed to be Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock who?
Holmes. Your costume?
Aha! I deduce your mistake, my dear Everett. I think you mean Hat Detective.
Hat Detective?
The British guy with the cool hat and the magnifying glass? He's been in a ton of old movies and stuff.
Yes, and that character's name is Sherlock Holmes.
Hat Detective.
It was still different at its core, but more threads than I originally realized were definitely there. It reminded me of another game that was turned into a show, and a show that was turned into a game. Parappa the Rapper is a rhythm game, largely regarded as the first rhythm game as we know them, where an optimistic dog uses the power of rap to solve his everyday problems and become the best version of himself. A few years after its release, the spin-off title Jammer Lammy was dropped, which featured the titular Lammy accomplishing similar feats, but this time with a guitar. And a couple years after that, we got the direct sequel, Parappa the Rapper 2. These 3 short games form a series passionately beloved by fans for its wackiness,
I need to reboot myself quick.
absolutely killer soundtracks, unique visuals, and off-kilter way the games can be conquered. They're vibrant, strange, and charming in a way few pieces of media are. This has helped them remain as a figure in the gaming zeitgeist, even though a new original title hasn't come out in over 20 years. But something not mentioned as often is that around the time of the second game's release, an anime began airing with an altered cast, a more laid-back vibe, and most significantly, next to no rapping. When I first started watching it, I had similar thoughts to the Costume Quest cartoon, but not nearly as extreme. It went kinda like this: hey, wait, where's Lammy? Where's Mott? Who are these Paula and Matt characters? Wait, did Parappa always have a baby sister? And also, hold up, we're 3 episodes in and he hasn't dropped a single bar. Oh well, the show is still fun though. The Parappa anime is a bit odd, ironically because of the fact that it's fairly normal. It's a soft, traditional Y2K anime art style versus the iconic cutout look of the source material. The tone is a more accessible slice of life, though it definitely does have its wacky moments, don't get me wrong. But regardless of that, I do think it looks good, and I enjoy having something Parappa adjacent to enjoy on a quiet evening when I don't feel like locking into a rhythm game session. I do wish with my whole heart that the OG cast, especially Lammy, were in the show, but I don't think the new additions are bad characters. They fit into the foil of the gang pretty well and create interesting scenarios. The weirdest thing I can't explain around is definitely the lack of rapping. It was an odd decision to have Parappa the Rapper not have a relationship with rap, but the backing soundtrack at large still goes hard since the original dev Masaya Matsuda was on the music team. The sound design in general is probably the most faithful aspect of the show because of this.
It's practice time. Cook those burgers.
Though I can understand why some fans would reject the series based off of some of its submissions, especially in episode 6 when everyone in the group needs to improvise a talent and they perfectly set it up for Parappa to rap, and then he does karate, which I guess is still technically a reference, but like, come on. Still, I think the anime carries a certain Parappa charm in its own way. The plot lines aren't so out of left field that I can't see the characters fitting in, which is more than I can say about the game Rocket Power Beach Bandits. The game Rocket Power Beach Bandits is unfaithful for the exact opposite reasons of Parappa the anime. It has the same exact crew you'd know and love if you were a fan of the IP, but this time they're faced with scenarios and responsibilities far beyond anything you'd expect in an episode of the cartoon. Rocket Power the show is a Klasky Supo produced banger about the day-to-day lives of a group of skater kids living in the fictional traditional SoCal beach town, Ocean Shores. They play sports, shred on all different kinds of boards, getting into trouble now and then, and hit all those classic coming-of-age skate punk type hijinks. Even during the TV movie event Reggie's Big Beach Break, where the stakes are probably the highest of the series, the heart of it all is skate culture and doing the right thing in the face of adversity.
You can take a shortcut. You can take a shortcut. You can take a shortcut. You can take a shortcut.
So it makes sense that in all the video game adaptations, you're skating and playing other sports. Except for Beach Bandits, where you're also traveling through the jungle, mountain plains, and evil laboratories to defeat robots and self-proclaimed gods to stop a socioeconomic conspiracy. It's an absolutely insane plotline relative to every other piece of Rocket Power media, and it's completely awesome because of that. And it really pulls a bait and switch too. In the early game, it's exactly what you'd expect. There's this new benefactor moving into town talking about how he's gonna invest in Ocean Shores, and the Rocket Gang is like, "This dude seems like bad news. I bet his company is the reason the beaches are getting messed up." And the plot is established as figuring out what his deal is. Then you find yourself in a skating contest against the character PJ, and you go through a tutorial for how the system works. And it stays standard like that for a little bit, but once the gang decides to hit up the lakes only to find them completely drained, it just keeps escalating from there. However, in between the wild espionage and boss battles, there is a strong backbone of an extreme sports simulator game more akin to the vibe of the cartoon. It's just frequently used as support to get from one bizarre mission to the next. But even when faced with these totally uncharacteristic situations, everyone acts weirdly in character. It's like a really out there fan fiction where the writer is clearly a diehard fan but also has a completely unhinged imagination. I remember first playing this game as a kid with my older siblings, and all of us being totally thrown for a loop by it. There were constant back and forths along the lines of, is this even Rocket Power right now? I don't know, but it's awesome. The Costume Quest series is interesting in the way that it readjusts the focus of the source material as well as altering the overall tone. The games are pretty much about the kids the entire time, and events are largely experienced through their perspective. You meet other kids as your companions that help you out, offer side quests, and believe in your mission to save Halloween. The monsters and adult characters that aren't directly antagonistic towards you are greatly outnumbered by the dramatized ones that are. It gives the series its sense of wonder and imagination, and it takes me back to the worlds I'd create in my head as a child and the way navigating the real world felt at the time. It's also very comedic throughout. There's moments of intensity, particularly in the sequel, but even then it's always more fantastical than serious, if that makes sense. The animation decides to shift the focus to include regular insights into modern monster society and their history, as well as the parents of the kids, the latter of which we really didn't see at all in the games. As I briefly mentioned earlier, there's also way more serious story beats. There's abandonment, betrayal, tragic backstories, family drama, and more. There's been plenty of times where trying to make a property more serious or attempting to recontextualize character relationships has horribly backfired, but here I think it really works. The dramedy blend never dips into being too campy, and the new perspectives enhance the world to feel full and alive in a new way. And it accomplishes this while still carrying the flame of the original when it does go back to being about the kids and their costumes. Prepare yourself for original sentence here. In this way, it's kind of like Waitress the Musical, Arrival, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Out of the three, the waitresses definitely have the most narrative similarities in common. They tell the story of a woman named Jenna who works at a pie shop discovering she's pregnant from her abusive husband she was intending to leave. Things are complicated further as she begins having an affair with her obstetrician, Dr. Palmater, while she continuously attempts to figure out how to ditch town. That largely remains the same, but the presentation makes for a very different viewing experience. And I think that's outside of just the medium change. Other transitions like Frozen, The Lion King, and Sweeney Todd match in tone and theatrics pretty well. There's even some non-musical titles like Heathers and Mean Girls where I can understand why adding musical theater to it doesn't necessarily really have to alter the vibe. They're already telling dramatized stories being presented in fairly Shakespearean ways at times in their originals. But Adrian Shelley's Waitress doesn't feel like that. It's very grounded and bitterly real in the way its pendulum pendulum swings between softness and tension. There's so many moments of careful contemplation and quiet suffering, but at the same time, it's filled with wonderfully down-to-earth conversations that can be really funny, and it's all accomplished in the slice-of-life way that fits its quaint small-town setting. Adding complex choreography and bold musical numbers to it adds a firm frame of spectacle that was completely absent before. That being said, the choreography and songs in question are so goddamn good. They creatively expand on the themes of the film and give a new side of the characters that I think remains very entertaining. There's some shifting around of where certain conversations happen, which does change their context a little, but I think the biggest direct change is the heavier focus on Jenna's mother. In the movie, she was clearly very important to her, as is described in a particularly emotional conversation with Dr. Pomatter, but in the stage play, she's given a sort of incorporeal presence that enters and exits the scene when Jenna is struggling or deep in thought. We also get insight into her mother's own relationship with her father that adds a layer of tragedy to the cycle she finds herself stuck in with Earl. That new perspective is really authentic to the original character to me, and I even bring it along to rewatches of the 2007 movie. Arrival, on the other hand, is an adaptation that heavily shifts the tone and the story details, and it lets you know that's happening pretty early on. The film is based on the novella Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. In the original short story, we follow a linguist named Dr. Louise Banks as she's tasked with attempting to communicate with aliens that have recently connected with Earth. Arrival is also about that, but we explore it in very different ways. There's little differences from the original, like her physicist partner being named Ian instead of Gary, and being played by Jeremy Renner instead of being cool. There's mid-tier things that carry a different weight, like her daughter, not a spoiler, happens at the beginning of both stories, dying of cancer instead of in a freak rock climbing accident. And then there's the big differences, like literally making the aliens arrive in 1,500-foot monoliths as opposed to what's described in the original as a 10-foot tall pane of glass that just serves as a video call of the aliens from their living rooms. The concept of that change is what largely carries the essence of the adaptation. Make things bigger, more dramatic, and more dire. In the original, Louise and Gary are one of several teams across the country all working together to synthesize what they're learning in their conversations. In Arrival, Louise is the only linguist in the entire continent chosen to help and constantly faces friction from the other Axis powers. Talking with the heptapods in the novella is bizarrely informal, and it's already happening by around page 5 and is even cute at times, like when the humans and aliens are showing each other what fruits they like to eat. In the movie, there's almost an hour of build-up before we even see the heptapods in person, and when we do, they're shrouded in a dense fog, are intimidatingly there in person, and only manage to exchange a single word. Majority of other big changes are versions of this idea right up to the ending, but there's still hyper-specific things that are carried over that make it clear the filmmakers were at least fans of the original. There's the aliens having trouble with algebra but getting more high concepts easily. There's the phrase non-zero-sum game inciting the same transition in the narrative. There's Dr. Banks's relationship with the etymology of the word kangaroo.
It's a good story.
Thanks. It's not true. But it proves my point.
And even though we're dealing with an altered Louise and a quite different story, the way this version of Louise navigates this version of the narrative feels accurate to the way her Story of Your Life counterpart would. I feel the same empathy, intelligence, and overall personality of our protagonist, even with such different causes to bring those qualities out. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is similar with how it treats its entire world. The visually astounding film is an adaptation of the 1981 book Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary Wolfe. The film follows hard-boiled private eye Eddie Valiant as he gets mixed up in a deep mystery in the heart of Toontown when... Do I have to explain it? Like, does anyone who clicked on this not know what Who Framed Roger Rabbit is? Okay, but it's going to be extremely brief. Roger is framed for murder, and Eddie reluctantly agrees to try and clear his name. The movie is regarded as a technical marvel for its fusion of live-action and animated sequences, and is equally beloved for its multifaceted comedy and impeccable performances. But if you don't know anything about the source material like me before making this video, you might be surprised to find out that in the book, the inciting incident is the eponymous Roger being murdered, and Eddie is actually trying to solve his death. That alone changes the angle of the whole thing, but there's also the way the universe works as a whole. In the book, the toons are comic stars that can physically manifest speech bubbles to talk with, which are then photographed to make comic strips, and the use of speech bubbles are an important recurring theme throughout the mystery. Toons can also regularly clone themselves for use in more dangerous jokes. This is also critical to the story because Eddie ends up finding a posthumous clone Roger that he made moments before his death that helps him put things together. But besides other stuff like that, yeah, the story is fundamentally different since the main character of one is dead in the other.
Remember me, Eddie? When I killed your brother, I talked.
But I think the satire of the noir genre, as well as the overall purpose of both works, is pretty consistent. The movie is maybe genuinely serious more often than the novel, but both are very wacky worlds containing a humorously juxtaposed gritty situation.
Scotch on the rocks. And I mean ice!
So yeah, an adaptation being unfaithful doesn't mean it's also bad. But even after making this video, I will admit it happens very often. It's tough to give objective reasons why though, because the idea of media being bad or good is obviously subjective in itself. But one thing that I feel connects all the examples I went over today is that when I experienced them, I felt that the people behind them really cared about what they were doing. And I think that's the more important factor. It's a hard feeling to describe, but people know it when they feel it. The feeling of watching an adaptation and thinking, wow, it's like they don't care about the source material at all. It's not the changes that ruin it, it's the reasons behind them. The greedy, misguided reasons are the ones that ruin things. And that goes beyond to include all the other methods of keeping a story going. Sequels, reboots, remakes, adaptations, even later seasons of the same show. You can change so much about a story, but if you're putting care into it, it can end up really, really good. When fall comes around this year, I'm gonna do my annual replay of Costume Quest. And after that, I'm gonna rewatch the show.
Exactly 100 years later, this Halloween night.
Thank all of you so much for watching, whoever's here. I know I say that every time, but I think I especially mean it for this one because of how much work went into this. Yeah, it took a while, but here it is. I hope you like it. I really enjoyed making it. There's some links down below if you want to support me or look at some of the deeper info of what it took to put this video together. Yeah, I hope you have a really good day.